Hello and good morning. Hi, welcome to our session today. Buyer beware, how to choose the right LMS for you. Hopefully in the next 20 to 30 minutes you'll get a good idea of kind of the pitfalls to avoid and the good ways to choose the right LMS. So to introduce myself, my name is Neil Bradley. I'm the UK Territory Manager for Rise Up here in the UK. We have today one of our very good clients with us, Dr. Anu Obaro, who's the online training lead for the National CT Colonography Training and Accreditation Programme. So what we're going to do is talk you through kind of the stages you go through to choose the best LMS, and you'll hear from Anu in terms of the journey she went on with this and how to choose the LMS they chose which was right for them. So just setting this in terms of the LMS landscape out there and what's there, I came across this slide recently from Josh Bersham, which I think gives a good overview of the complexity of the LMS landscape in terms of what's out there. There's a number of different layers there. You've got the LXP layer, LMS layer, different program layers. As you can see, there's a multitude of different platforms to pick from, to choose from out there. And choosing the right one for you is the most important decision you'll make on your learning journey. Which is one of the reasons why I came across this stat on Fosway. 65% of L&D leaders are dissatisfied with their learning technology. That's quite a large number of L&D leaders who have got technology in place which isn't working rightly for them. So 2/3 of those leaders are dissatisfied with that technology. And that's all because how they choose their learning technology and the processes they go through. So the factors to consider is your organisation and audience. Each sector's got its own specific training courses, restrictions, different regulations, certifications. It's all about knowing what sector you're in and what certifications and regulations you have there. If you're a training provider, then you need to find out what training that suits the industry you're in. So it's really getting to know the organisation you're in and your audience. The expectations, objectives and goals. When you need to choose an LMS that suits the training courses you're looking to offer, find out who are your learners, what levels of education do they have is another thing you need to consider. Also, how tech savvy are your learners? Are they going to be able to kind of navigate the systems you have in place? And your training style will give you a good guide towards what certain education tools you need. Whether you're a business or a training provider, you need to establish your priorities. And each one's got different priorities. So your priorities might be you need to reduce the administrative burden of your admin, your training, or it might be that you need to deploy different training sessions for partners, for subsidiaries, for different departments. So it's setting those objectives and goals you have in place. So once you've defined your objectives, you need to define your target learners. So once you've defined your target learners, you need to see what your priorities are, and then from that you need to know what you need to teach them. And then once you've got those three in place, you're ready to sketch out an outline of what your training offering looks like. And that can usually be broken down to three different phases we find. You've got your face-to-face classroom learning, you've got your e-learning, or then you have a blended approach, which is a mixture of all three. Also you need to consider things like, do you want to offer social learning? If so, you need to offer forums, community pages within your e-learning system, or you plan to create your own content. If you are, so you need to find different content authoring tools that are compatible with your current platform. Which brings us on the kind of your technical environmental needs. You need to ensure your existing technical infrastructure is compatible with the LMS platform you have. Does it integrate with your HR system? Does it integrate with your corporate platform, your CRM systems? Do you need SSO? Do you need single sign-on? How do your learners currently consume training? Is it through a laptop? Is it through mobile devices? Is it through workstations? Another area to consider is customer support and experience. Does your LMS provider provide ongoing customer support and training? How does that look like? It's all about going on a journey with your customers and clients in terms of your LMS provider, and be honest with them in terms of your knowledge of LMS. Because if you're honest with them in terms of your knowledge of what you need, they can help you more in terms of what you need to find. Another thing to consider is scalability and future planning. Looking 2, 3, 4 years down the line, how many trainers will you have on your platform? What would it look like? Can the platform you pick scale as you grow? And then finally, budget, in terms of the budget costs. Really need to have a plan in terms of how that looks like. What does that look like? There's different pricing models out there in terms of LMS platforms. Is it a license model by number of users? Is it how many training paths or content they consume? Is everything included in that price in terms of implementations, SSO, integrations? So you need to kind of define that budget as you go along. There is a very kind of quick whistle-stop tour of some of the key points. I think better way to explain that is when we have a kind of a real live kind of customer experience, which have Dr. Anu here, who's going to talk you through kind of the journey they went on in terms of the NHS, in terms of what they look for in their training provider, and how they came to the decision they came to.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Because I can't hear, yeah, kinda. Okay, I'll try and speak up. So thank you for having me. My name's Anu Obaro. I'm a consultant radiologist and I work in London. And I'm not techie at all, so I am a kind of an interloper here. But I plan to share kind of our experience and hopefully give some context to some of the examples that Neil was sharing. So I am doing some PhD research into bowel cancer screening. And the type of imaging that we use to diagnose bowel cancer early is called CT colonography. And basically it's very safe, it's non-invasive, it's low cost, and it's very sensitive for detecting early cancers. So it's a great test when it's done well, but unfortunately there is no standardized training to learn how to do it well, how to perform the study, and also how to interpret the scans. So basically, depending on where you train in the country, how good your supervisors are, how many cases go through your hospital, that will affect the quality of the training that you get. So it's very ad hoc. We've got pockets of really great care in parts of the country, and then pockets of very not so great care. So what we wanted to do is try and address that variability. So COVID happened, which kind of decimated my research. And what we decided, well, we kind of always knew that we had to have some sort of online delivery of our training content. If you've done anything in the NHS, you will know that there is an absolute truckload of mandatory training that you have to do at, well, it feels like all the time. And a lot of it is quite dated, unfortunately, because there's a huge infrastructure that they have to manage. So what we had to consider is, if we want to deliver really good, high quality training for CT colonography, what's the best way to do that? We wanted to be autonomous. We didn't want to get sucked into the big NHS machine. So we wanted to be able to use best practice principles. We wanted to use a great evidence base. We wanted to use all of the kind of cutting edge tech that the NHS isn't really known for. So we had to set up a centralized system. We know that we're trying to train across the country, so we have to allow our platform to be accessible by our trainees across different regions. We wanted there to be minimal setup. During my research, I manually emailed hundreds of doctors across the country, manually marked their tests, which was an immense joy, as you can imagine, manually sent them all of their results, manually did their feedback, and then responded to all of their questions. Clearly, that's not sustainable. And if we wanted to roll out our training nationally, we were going to have some way to deliver that in a much more automated fashion. And I've already mentioned that our trainees were based across different geographical regions. So again, we had to make sure that our learning was accessible. So our primary objective is to really improve the quality of the training for technique in CT colonography and the quality of training for interpretation. So that's really twofold. Obviously, we also want to save time, not just my time, but the time of the whole steering group, all of the project management, in how we manage our interaction with our trainees. We also wanted to provide automated results. So we're going to be doing lots of testing. These are patients' lives that we're looking at. We have to be accurate. We wanted to automate all of that feedback as much as possible. And because we were research-based, we wanted to make sure that the analytics that we got back would be robust enough for us to kind of iterate and continue to improve as we go forward. So, once we recognized that we needed a learning platform, I had to then figure out what the best platform was. And I'm a doctor. This is my first time here. It's completely overwhelming. So as you can imagine, I kind of just Googled learning. Well, I didn't even Google learning management system because I didn't know what that was. I Googled e-learning, how to provide that, and there's like 10 billion results, obviously. So it was completely a black hole. So what I realized is that I wasn't going to be able to do this by myself. So quite quickly, after I wrote my initial kind of dream of if I could deliver online learning for CT colonography, this is what I would do, I realized I need somebody to help me wade through all of this to find the best solution. So delegate. So I went out and built a team. So I found experts. So I can do the subject matter. I can provide the content, which is going to hopefully improve our training. I need somebody else to help me identify the right vendor, how to package that content, and to advise the team on how best to deliver that. So because we had a really clear research goal, that allowed us to streamline the process of developing the team and getting together the expertise that was necessary. So in 2016, I wrote down the ultimate wish list for this platform. I was like, I have all the money, I'm not constrained by NHS budgets, and I can throw as much money and design work at it as I can. And I wrote a huge list of showstoppers. So ideally, these are all the pain points that I want to address. This is all the automation. This is all the individualization. And I basically wrote a list of everything, and then I was reasonable and applied a filter. So these are the desirable things, these are the preferred things, and these are the optional extras. And that was a really critical and helpful step in the overall process. You have to recognize what the goal is that you're trying to achieve. If you could have anything, what would it be? And then work backwards, because obviously you have to work within your budget. So once I'd written the brief and got my team together, we refined the brief, made it more applicable in text speak and not just kind of flowery language. And then we shared that with a variety of vendors. And really the quality of the vendors that we got back was completely dependent on the quality of the brief. The more detailed the brief is, the better that the vendor will understand what your needs are and then can tell you whether or not they can fit the bill. Now, again, we're clinicians, so we really like how it looks on the front. We want to see that it's shiny, that it's doing all the things that we want. So it's really important, again, for us and the team to get trial access. It's really different when somebody presents to you versus when you log in and you're like, where did they say I should find that again? Oh, it looked really easy when she was setting up that. It's like 50 million clicks, I can't do it. So for us, trial access was so important. And again, our work is partly charity funded, so we have to justify to our funders why we've picked a particular vendor. So if we can get in and interrogate it, make sure that it's doing what we want it to do, we're going to make a better decision. I've already mentioned that we have plans to roll out our training nationally. At the moment, we're doing regional pilots. So for us, it was really important to understand the development map of our vendor, but also to see that it's scalable with what we want. So today, I might only need 100 licenses, but in 3 years, I might need 5,000. And if you're not a vendor that can deal with that kind of growth or doesn't have the infrastructure to manage that, I need to know that decision now before I give you 3 years lots of money. And demonstrations were great. Again, when we built our team, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't the person that was making the decision, so then I couldn't get blamed if it all went wrong. So all the stakeholders got on board. We had objective marking criteria so that when we had our vendors present, everybody marked them objectively. We scored, they were weighted according to our showstoppers. Again, so that we could justify to our funders, this is why we have picked this particular vendor, this is the criteria that we really believe that they meet. And again, it's a shared decision, so we've got buy-in from our whole project team. So, if I had to do this again, I wouldn't do 4 years of manual labor to get to this point, but what I would say was the most valuable learning point in that process is the writing of the brief. So although the version I think that we sent round was version 6 or 7, that whole process of going through what our requirements were, working on our content, allowed us to then pick 7 really good vendors to hear from. And so I wouldn't do that differently, but I would say if that's what this is the journey that you're on, that is the most critical step for you to do to make sure that you get a vendor that is going to meet your needs. And also definitely get an LMS expert in earlier. It saves a lot of sleepless nights. So the top 3 things that I would advise you to consider. So I think, saw 7 vendors. As I mentioned, I wrote the brief in 2016, then did a PhD, and now a year ago we got the funding to actually develop the national program. Not to say that it's going to take 5 years for you to find an LMS and to roll out your training, but it meant that we had a lot of time to kind of explore. And the worst thing that you want to do is make a decision under pressure. And the vendor that we actually went with, which is Rise Up, who you can see over here, were actually our last vendor. So they were the final people that were kind of, oh, there's one more that we kind of would like you to see. And we had actually made a decision prior to seeing them, and then they came and were awesome, so we went with them instead. But if we had been under pressure, we would have chosen someone else, and the project would still work because we would have made it work. But allowing yourself that time for comparison means that you're really going to get the best vendor for your needs. So that's the top thing. I've said it several times, but be clear about the goal. I'm doing lots of work with other parts of the NHS now who are like, oh, we need an e-learning system, we need a learning management system. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you trying to train? Well, just everything. Well, that's not a clear goal, and maybe you should break it down. And if you don't have a clear idea of either the content or the audience or why you need to do this training and how frequent this training needs to be, the scale of the training, again, it's going to be really difficult to find a vendor that's going to meet your needs. So you need to be clear about the goal and the vision for your online learning. And have a budget. So obviously I wrote my wish list with no budget. And then when I was told what the budget was, I was like, well, what about Getty Images? They're so pretty and I want really nice photos for the training, but have a budget. But then also within that budget, I think it's really important to put aside a contingency for some bespoke work. We recognized quite early on that what we were trying to do through our training, it hasn't been done in the way that we want to do it before. A lot of the analytics that we're asking for, because they're research-based, are not the same, the general analytics that you get from learning management systems. So we're definitely going to have to do some bespoke development work. So we know from the outset that we need to put aside a bit of money to allow us to do that. So you might not find an LMS that off the shelf is going to deliver all of your needs. So it's worth just considering extra budget and time for bespoke development work. And in tandem to all of, so this is obviously weeks and weeks worth of work, but in tandem to all of that recon that you're doing, you can still be developing the content that you're going to be training on. So that's what we did. We developed a London pilot. I kind of smushed together all of the content that we had from our subject matter experts, and we had that on a learning content system so that people could just access it while we were doing the recon for our fully fledged LMS. So the program's going really well because we decided to, I guess, go independently and not go within the general NHS infrastructure for mandatory training. We've been able to build something that looks really nice and fancy and that looks different to the standard mandatory training that people are used to getting. And also what we've been able to build is something that's responsive, iterative, that is giving the feedback that we know works and improves our training. And so because we are trying to get doctors better at doing a particular thing, they don't have a lot of time, they have even less patience, so it has to be hitting all of the points. You have to be showing them where things are going wrong, where things are going right, doing appropriate assessments. So it's been really amazing to see how we can do that through our collaboration with Rise Up. So at the moment we're in the process of building the actual infrastructure for the program. So whilst we're running the pilot, we're continuing to build this, and then we will hopefully be onboarding people towards the end of the year. what's so lovely about what we're doing is that it's allowing us to do all the things that you would see, I think, in the corporate world. So it sounds ridiculous, but like videos with subtitles teaching you something, like this is like a fantastic thing for us, honestly. And somebody being able to talk you through how to review a scan, somebody being able to show you this is the cancer that you missed, this is why you missed it, and then now give you a whole bunch of other cases to make sure you don't miss it again. And so that's going to be hopefully really powerful work that is going to positively impact our patients' lives. So in summary, define the goal, define the vision. And I think what although I'm the online training lead for our program, the online training is a small part of the overall educational package. Obviously, we're all here to talk about LMSs, but that, for us at least, is only a small part of the overall educational journey. So understanding where that fits into practical, face-to-face training, observed procedures, etc., is really important. Your detailed requirements list, this was just a list in Excel for us with our desired, preferred and optional. Again, really, really important. It helps to prevent scope creep. When you find a vendor that can do what you want, suddenly there'll be like a million things that you want to add on that may or may not be in your budget. So if you've got your list written prospectively, you're less likely to just add on things that look fancy. Reasonable timeline. I don't know how it works for you guys. Our timelines are completely unreasonable all the time. This is all supposed to have been done a year ago. Not reasonable, but have a reasonable timeline to allow yourself to do the best work. Get a third-party expert if necessary. That was very necessary for us. We are doctors. We're not learning designers. We're not content designers. We can give the content. We can say when it's wrong or when there's a mistake. But we definitely needed to recognize that we couldn't deliver what we wanted to do all in-house. And that was definitely a tough conversation, because when a funder gives you money, they don't expect you to then go and hire somebody else to do the job. But it was important for us in order to be able to develop the best sort of program for us to do that. And I mean, for us, one of the reasons why we've chosen Rise Up is that they're super responsive. They've been able to come back and say to us, that doesn't really make sense, maybe think about this, or this is a great idea, this is how we can expand that. And I think that's really important, to have that sort of dialogue and collaboration with whichever vendor you end up choosing. And for us, that was really important, and one of the reasons that we ended up working with them. Any questions? Sure. You might have to shout. Yeah. So the question was, how do we do automated marking through the platform? So it depends on what you're assessing. So for us, we have multiple choice questions, which are automated. I don't know what the technology is, but we just tell the thing the answer, and then it says, yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong. So that's programmed on the back end. The other thing for imaging that's really important is we're asking people to detect cancers or precursors to cancers. So you can mark hotspots on images. So we'll show them a still image, and they have to drag an arrow, and then we can say, yes, that's right, no, that's wrong. Then the thing that we are having to do specific development work for, again, because of imaging, is how we mark people going through a series of scans. So we're doing lots of work to do some coding that allows us to do that, because again, doctors don't have a lot of time. They don't want to report a scan, send an email, and then I read it and say, yes, you got the cancer, and then I email it back. So we're working to automate all of that. But that's the specialist development work that I was referring to, that I knew that we were going to need, that Rise Up are going to help us deliver. Yep. Sorry, I can't hear you. Say that again.
Where commercial staff involved in this,
Yeah, so the question was, were commercial staff involved in the procurement? And no. So because we are an entity that's been created from an academic body, so we have a steering group which has stakeholders from various parts. So we don't have a technology department. So we manage the budget within the academic foundation. So that's why we were able to then procure a vendor that we wanted versus having to go through the normal procurement chains that you'd have to do if you were within an NHS institution. Does that make sense? Any other questions? So thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. And if you need more information, we're just on K12 next to us here. Come over and see us at the show. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.